and I am one of the co-founders here at Day One Careers. Just to give you a little bit of the origin story, I was a senior leader and bar raiser at Amazon for a number of years. And in that time, I interviewed a lot of people, both in terms of as an interviewer, but also as a bar raiser. And whilst I was doing that, I noticed that there were some kind of crazy things that some people were doing. I have to be honest with you, some bonkers things that people were doing. And I started to see some patterns and I started to ask candidates, like, oh, you did this, kind of, where did you get that idea from? And it became clear to me there was a whole, I would say a whole bunch. There was an amount of content on specifically YouTube, but also kind of through Google searches that people were using to help instruct them on how to do well in the interviews. So, being the good Amazonian that I was, I'm a big dive deeper. It's my favorite LP. I started to look into the content that they were looking at and discovered that some of it was just dreadful. There was content up there from people that had never worked at Amazon, that had clearly put things in there that just weren't true. Don't know where they got them from. And there was content from existing and ex-Amazonians, but given from a very specific perspective because they had limited scope of experience. So I decided, because it bugged the hell out of me that there was bad content on YouTube, just to start up a little YouTube channel of my own whilst I was working at Amazon. And I would just post videos. And if you check out the YouTube channel, you'll easily be able to tell which videos those were, because they are horrible in terms of their production values and also my ability to deliver. But I started to post this content up, and then after a while, I left Amazon and I decided to see if I could just fill some bills, quite honestly, with supporting candidates. And I set up my own little business, the Amazon Interviewers Academy, and I was selling digital courses and doing one-to-one coaching. At the same time, unbeknownst to me, Yevgeny was also working at Amazon and bizarrely sat one floor below me in the office in London. And he had done something similar. And we happened to cross paths through a common candidate who we both worked with, who suggested that we meet. We did. We realized we would be better working together than we would be working in competition. And we joined together and created Day One Careers. So at Day One Careers, we offer an amazing digital course with AI tool capabilities, just incredible, to candidates who want to do well in their Amazon interview. And we also do one-to-one coaching. And of course, we have this extensive YouTube channel, which I'm hoping is working, because there's not a lot of you folks there today. And I'm really panicking that the YouTube stuff isn't surfacing to everybody. But hey, we are who we are and we are where we are. So whoever's here, I'm here to answer your questions. So the way this whole thing usually works is Yevgeny and I together answer your questions, but looks like I'm flying solo today. So what you can do is, hopefully you can see the little comment box on the right-hand side of your screen if you're on YouTube. If you are on LinkedIn, which doesn't look like it's worked, you can put comments underneath the LinkedIn stream. And you can ask me any question you like about your Amazon interview experience. Specifically, my subject matter expertise is going to be on the leadership principle and the behavioral questions and the process itself. If you have specific questions about the functional side of your interview, say you're a software development engineer and you want to know what type of coding tasks you're going to get, or if you're a finance person, you want to get a sense of whether you're going to have to do SQL or whatever it might be, I am not your girl for that. There are tens, well, let's say tens of thousands. There are definitely thousands of different job families in Amazon. And I obviously cannot be a functional subject matter expert in all of those. So I'm afraid if you have those types of questions, I'm not going to be able to cover them. But pretty much any other questions you have, shoot, and I will give them a good go. So I think I've covered all of the kind of house rules here. Oh, just to say, if you have a very long question, I'm not sure what the character limit is on YouTube, but just do a 1 and then a 2 and then a 3, and then I can follow it through the thread if it's a long question. Okay, I shouldn't have bothered making my cup of coffee because I'm not going to get any time to drink it now that Yevgeny's not here. But hey ho, who needs caffeine when you've got natural energy levels like me? So let's give it a go and see what happens. So I can see one question here. It's going to be a very short session if we only have one question. So the rest of you that are out there, by all means, drop a question down and we will see. But let's just get going. I'm really worried that he's like unable to get into the chat, into the actual session itself, but Hasn't messaged me to say that. So let's just pull this one up, see how this works. There we go. Okay, that's pretty similar to my previous platform. So apart from it's tiny and I have dreadful eyesight. So just putting it out, how does the year-on-year TC increase work compared to the offer letter I signed? Does the base increase every year with promotions? RSUs do vest, but wanted to know about base. Okay, so this is obviously going to change depending on exactly where you're working. So Amazon is a global company. There are different norms in different countries. So I will speak to my knowledge of Europe and with some confidence that that also applies to the US. Exactly what the rest of the world looks like when if we're talking about UAE or Africa or India, I'm not going to claim that this applies there. But in terms of base increases, usually they are pretty non-existent. The company tends to try to keep pace with inflation, but I have never personally had a pay increase on my base more than 2.5%. And the largest percentage increase that I ever approved for my direct reports, where this person was well below the kind of the average in terms of the pay scale that they were working on in their particular job function, was 5%. So really, you cannot rely on year-on-year base salary increases meeting inflation. Right? You're lucky if it'll meet inflation. In terms then of what did you ask me? Promotions. Okay, let's cover promotions next. In terms of promotions, what happens when you get promoted varies, and it's very much dependent on where you are currently in the salary band of the level that you are currently operating at. So salary bands have an overlap. So it's very possible for someone at the bottom of, let's just plant it in L5s and L6s just for simplicity. It's very possible that someone who is at the bottom of at the top of an L5 band is earning more than someone who is at the bottom of an L6 band. So if you happen to already be at the top of an L5 band and then you get promoted to L6, it is very possible that you will get no compensation increase whatsoever because you are already within the range of the L6 band. If you are pretty low on the L5 band and you get promoted to an L6 band, you will simply find yourself going to the very bottom of the L6 band, which would be the equivalent of being at the very top of the L5 band. Now, this is very broad strokes, and there's going to be deviation across different job families and less and more overlap between levels, yada, yada, but this is just kind of the general principle in terms of what you can expect. Your next question was then about RSUs and what happens year on year for RSUs. So you'll get your initial forecast of what they're offering you when you sign up to your role over a 4-year window is what you'll get. And they'll tell you broadly how many RSUs they expect to give you year on year on year as part of that 4-year forecast. Now, that is based on an assumption of what the share price is going to be in that year, because essentially what they're trying to do is reach a total compensation target. To reach that total compensation target is a combination of your base pay, a sign-on bonus, and the RSUs. So if in a subsequent year the share value is less than what they forecasted it would be, and therefore the number of RSUs that they gave you, they will top up your RSUs in order to get you back to that total compensation target that they had initially set. If the share price goes above what they had forecasted it to be when they gave you your original compensation forecast, you still get to keep all of those RSUs and you benefit from the luck of the markets. When it comes to then your annual, after those 4 years, and then they essentially will present you with what next year looks like, they will continue to try and get you to that average total compensation target that they set out initially. So if the share price is about where they thought it would be in your year 4, and therefore the RSUs that you got was at the level where they had forecasted them to be, chances are year 5 is going to look very similar to year 4. If the share price is materially higher than where they had originally forecasted it to be at year 4, and actually you're making well over what the total target compensation was when they set out that plan, you will find that the number of shares that you get in year 5, RSUs, sorry, the number of RSUs you get in year 5 will materially decrease, because what they're trying to do is target that original total compensation average, and you just got lucky with the markets and happened to earn more over the last 4 years. I hope that all makes sense. I think I've covered off all aspects of your question. Let me know if I missed anything. Okay, I'm going to try and pop you back in anyway. There you go. All right, so moving on then to my next question. Right, I'm trying to show this one. Come along. Right. Hello. Gosh, this text is so tiny for my dreadful eyesight. I'm going to have to do something about this. So you are going to have a loop interview soon. Congratulations. Well done for getting to loop. The vast majority of people don't. You would like my opinion on how to display data, because one of the LPs is Dive Deep requiring showing data. All right. So there are 2 ways of thinking about being data centric when you are preparing for an Amazon interview. The first is putting clear metrics into your results. Now, exactly how to do that on each story is going to differ, because it's going to depend on the nature of the story. So it's hard to be specific with you here. But what you're essentially looking to do is prove your impact with some kind of a metric. So in an ideal situation for Dive Deep, maybe you were solving some kind of problem, maybe you saw some type of opportunity, and the result that you're going to get is, as a result of what you identified through your Dive Deep, you have moved metric X from point A to point B. So you're looking for absolute number movements, you're looking for percentage point increases, you're looking for year over year, quarter over quarter, week over week percentage increases. You need to always make sure that you put those absolute numbers in context. So, for example, if you want to talk about a growth in sales and you grew sales by 10%, then tell us that the previous period's sales increases were actually only 5%. So you can prove that actually what you've done is a 5% increment over an original 5% increase. So that's what you're really looking for in terms of your results, proving your impact with some hard numbers. Any metric will do, quite honestly. It doesn't have to be sales. It could be time savings. As I said, it could be sales. It could be efficiency metrics. It could be quality metrics. Anything that you could essentially measure is a candidate for putting into your results. The other dimension to think about when it comes to incorporating data into your answers, and this is the advanced coaching, people. You're not going to get this from anyone else on the web. The other variable to think about is a concept that I like to call talking with data. So to be an Amazonian, it's not really enough just to slam a load of metrics into your results section. What they're looking for is people who think fundamentally in binary, people who think fundamentally in numbers. So any opportunity that you have in your story to replace an adjective or an adverb with a metric is going to make you sound more Amazonian. So for example, if you're setting up a situation and you're talking about, oh, something when we used to have a large number of sales coming through X channel. I'm just using this because I'm a marketer, so it's an easy kind of example for me. We used to have a lot of our sales coming through the organic channel, and then suddenly over the course of a month, that number dropped dramatically. That doesn't sound very Amazonian. what you want to do in the setting up that situation would be, we used to get 70% of our sales coming through the organic search channel. Within a month, we saw that 80% drop down to 60%. This raised a red flag. So that's not a number that I put into my results. I have put some kind of a metric slash numerically slash binary focused language into setting up my situation. That's what Amazonians do. They think in data points and don't just constrain that to your results. Anywhere that you could potentially put a data point in your story, in the situation, in the task, in the actions, you got to put it in. And that way you smell, dare I say, more Amazonian. Okay, I hope that helps. I will put you back into the pot. Okay, moving on to the next line. Oh, this is a tough one. What is the usual timeline to move from L6 to L7? Any tips to avoid the bureaucracy and politics? There is no usual time to move from L6 to L7. I've seen people do it in 6 months. I've seen people do it in 6 years. There's no usual timeline, and there's no timeline that anyone is particularly targeting. I think the challenge now, in that Andy has clearly broadcast a requirement to flatten the organization, it's going to be probably a lot harder to move from L6 to L7 than it used to be. L7s traditionally are line manager roles. There are some functions where an L7 can be an IC. Product teams often have L7s as ICs, individual contributor, that means. But broadly speaking, to be an L7, you would tend to have direct reports. And with the flattening of the organization, I think that's probably going to be harder going forward. So no kind of insider kind of tips for you there. I'm afraid it's just going to depend on the organization that you're in and how good you are. Any tips on avoiding the bureaucracy and politics? um, I mean, a million and none all at the same time. I mean, I think at the heart of it, if you want to get promoted, you have to be helping your manager be successful. You're successful if they're successful. Once your manager is successful, then they're going to be your champion. In an ideal world, you make your manager so successful, they get promoted, and then you can get promoted into their role. But if your manager is not championing you, then you are not going to get promoted. Be a problem solver. I think if you can solve problems for people not just in your direct line team, but outside of your team, then you start to win advocates in a way that possibly those who are very kind of team centric aren't going to win advocates. Obviously, there's a balance there. You need to be delivering for your own team and not prioritizing other teams, but essentially building your network and building advocates is the way to get promoted. But that in itself is politics. And I'm afraid if you work in any large organization, in fact, if you work in any organization at all, you face politics, because I'm going to bore you here. Politic is an ancient Greek word, and that essentially was a city-state, a community. Once you are operating within a community, you face politic, because politic is fundamentally the interaction of human beings within a community or city-state. There is no way of avoiding it. You just have to be good at it, or accept that you're not good at it and realize that that's probably going to limit your career. That's not unique to Amazon. I would make that statement in pretty much any organization. I hope that helps, and I hope you enjoyed my little lesson on ancient Greek. Okay, my mom is back. My mom has made it a thing to always come to these sessions. Hey, mom, how you doing? I love my mom. She's fabulous. Okay, let's pick up another one. There we go. If anyone else wants to say hi to my mom in the chat, feel free. She's very friendly. During the phone interview with a hiring manager, they already asked you why Amazon and questions related to the JD to check your ability. Will the loop interview ask similar questions? Oh, look, it cuts off. Oh, that's interesting. apologies, you can't see half of it. I don't know how that works. I'll have to play around with this a little bit later. So the rest of the question there was, will loop interviews ask similar questions, e.g. why Amazon? So yes. So the way it's supposed to work, at least the old policy when I was there, was your answers to tell me about yourself and why do you want this job, etc., weren't really supposed to be used as evidence to make a decision as to move you on to the next step or not. This seems to have fallen by the wayside, and these types of questions are now pretty fundamental when it comes to at least the early rounds. Once you get to loop and there's a bar raiser overseeing everything, in theory, those questions should not really be considered as evidence for making the decision to hire you or not hire you. But inevitably, they are asked. And generally, they function a bit more as a warm up question. It's super weird to kind of get on a chime with someone you've never met before and just say, right, let's get going and start throwing questions at them. That's just not comfortable for anyone. So there's always an element where your interviewer is going to try and do some kind of a warm up. So tell me about yourself. Why are you interested in this job? When it comes to loop, yes, they get asked, but generally they aren't important answers. And I would suggest that you have a very concise version of the version that you created in the early round just to share with your interviewer. And then you can get on to the questions that do actually count towards the decision as quickly as possible. I have to say, when I was interviewing, I tried to avoid these ones completely. And for me, it would be banal chit chat about the weather or how someone's weekend went, or do they have water with them? Because generally I didn't want people to kind of start freaking out about having to give me this kind of constructed answer when really all I wanted to do was make them feel a little bit more comfortable before we got into the meat of it. But yes, is the answer probably, but they aren't really about that. It's about warming up. So make it nice and concise and then move on as quickly as you can. Okay, let's move on to the next question then. She's going to try moving to the next question. Okay, right. Now, I didn't read this before I brought it up, and I'm sure that I'm going to fall foul of that in a second. So let's just see. I worked as a transaction risk investigator in Amazon in 2020. Okay. And now you recently graduated in data science. Very good. Well done. And you got a phone screen interview. I'm having a bit gap in building stories. Any tips on data? Right. I really don't understand that question. You're going to have to get a bit more specific. So you're saying you have a gap in building stories, i.e., I don't have as many stories as I want. Any tips on data? And now we're moving on to data. So I do not understand that question. I'm sorry. I'm going to need you to ask it in a different way, please. Okay, moving on to the next question. Whoop. Right, what and how they evaluate in loop interview. Okay, so they evaluate in a loop interview in exactly the same way as they evaluate in any other interview. There are essentially three things they're looking for. The first is, can you functionally do the job? So at some point, someone may ask you some functional questions in your actual loop interview, or they may derive from your leadership principle answers an understanding of your functional skills. That's their choice. Then the second thing that they're looking for is, do you demonstrate the behaviors that they're looking for in terms of the key leadership principles? And then finally, they wrap all of that up and they'll do a little bit of self-reflection and ask themselves, are you raising the bar? So raising the bar is essentially if they mentally compare you to other people operating at the same level in the same or similar roles, can they imagine that only the top 50% of those people could have done what you described yourself doing in the way you described yourself doing it? So those are essentially the three things that they're looking to conclude in any interview in terms of their assessment of it. They do have a very clear view of what they are looking for in each leadership principle, and that is very clearly documented. Oh dear, right, Evgeny's just told me that he is not allowed in, so hang on. Let's try this. Right, let's see if that works. So they have a very clear view of exactly what it is that they're looking for, and they will look at how you have described your behaviors as part of your narrative and effectively use it as a tick box. Have I seen the evidence of this? And then what they will do after that is make some kind of a slightly subjective judgment as to how they feel you calibrate on a 5-point scale when it comes to that leadership principle. So they've got strength, neutral, some concern, or concern, and they have to decide where they're going to calibrate you on that scale for each of the leadership principles that they've tested you for. And then the group discusses overall, looking at this overall picture based on the calibrations that we've agreed on for this candidate for each of the leadership principles, and based on the hiring manager and the functional experts in the team's opinion on their functional capabilities, and based on our somewhat subjective assessment as to whether they are articulating things that we believe only the top 50% of people operating at that level in the same role or similar roles can do. Do we want to hire that person? So there is a combination of objective and subjective measures that then bring the group to a final decision. There's lots of complexities about, does everyone have to agree or does everyone not have to agree? Who gets the final vote? Blah, blah, blah. I could go on forever about that, but essentially that is how and what they evaluate when it comes to the loop. Oh, and we have Yevgeny. Welcome, Yevgeny.
Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Oh, you're very quiet to me. I don't know about everybody else.
Huh.
I'm going to turn my volume up, and then everyone else can tell us whether you're quiet for them as well.
It says auto gain.
Right. Okay, so whilst you're fiddling around with that, Yevgeny, I will just keep going. Right, where was that last one that I was on? Right. Okay, so, okay, great. So next question here. She is going to try and get it on. I interviewed a couple of weeks ago, Gareth, and you did not get moved to the loop. Can I still apply for other roles? Yes, you should be able to apply for other roles. Generally, it's only when you fail a loop that you get a cooling off period, which is now standardized to 12 months. But anyone that's failing earlier on in the process, as a general rule, you are free to just reapply to other roles. But what I would say, Gareth, is before you do that, you might want to take a moment of self-reflection. Do you think that you failed to make it through that first round because you weren't a functional fit for the role? Or do you feel that actually you've got a really good functional fit for the job description, and therefore in probability it might have been your performance when it came to those hygiene questions or the leadership principle questions that maybe you answered in your interview that might have let you down? If it's the latter, I would spend some time preparing again, reflecting on the stories that you used before you apply again. Because what you don't really want is a series of failed early rounds in your Amazon record, because that makes you look unattractive as a potential prospect to make it past loop. If you keep failing at first round, when a recruiter looks at your profile, they're going to have lower confidence that you are likely to make it all the way through loop. So don't just bang your resume out there. Have a think about why you think it didn't work. I know you're not going to get feedback from Amazon. Sorry, there's nothing anyone can do about that. But a little bit of self-reflection is worth doing before you make another attempt at an early round. Okay, you good to go, Yevgeny? Do you want to pick one up?
I would be good to go, but I can't see anything in the chat. My chat's empty.
Ah, all right.
New teething problems, people. We moved to a different streaming platform, and we're enjoying the benefits of it.
Okay. I tell you what, I will pull it up and then you can read it. I'll proof it first to make sure it's not a trap. Promise. Promise I'll be kind.
Just gonna start picking the trickiest ones right now.
Really
I know
nasty
what's gonna
ones.
happen.
Okay, there you go. You can have this one. Come on. Gosh, you have to be very precise with where you click on this one.
Is this the what are your thoughts on rehiring an
Yes.
employee?
What are your thoughts on
Amazon?
rehiring an employee in Amazon?
And how I can stand out in my preparation as an ex-Amazonian? Jimmy, to answer that one. Okay, cool. Right. So, what are your thoughts about rehiring an employee in Amazon? So, look, my personal thoughts, I think is great. You know, if you fit the role, if what you have to, what you're bringing in, if it's what I'm looking for as a hiring manager, I think as someone who used to work for the same company, you know the company, you know the business, you know the culture, so it's likely that you're going to have a shorter ramp up period. And if I'm a hiring manager, and if you've ever been a hiring manager in a company as flat and as usually under resourced as Amazon, that's great. Like it's amazing, right? It's a godsend. So as long as your motivation is in the right place, as long as you're, I don't feel like you're a flight risk or you're joining for the wrong reasons. If if you're genuinely happy to give it another full go and you're fully committed to make it, the best boomerang move as possible, then that's great. And I love the opportunity. I don't believe Amazon has any particular policy. They will consider you, they will interview you, and if you get it, you get it. I know plenty of folks who return back to Amazon and they're having a great time. So in terms of how can you stand out in your preparation as an ex-Amazonian, to be honest, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think there's anything special that you need to do as an ex-Amazonian. Just do what you normally would have done. Do what you normally would have done as an external candidate or as an internal candidate moving roles. It's the same process with some differences, and you will be interviewed and you will need to raise the bar. I believe if you're not flying back within 6 months. Is that correct? You don't know.
Don't know. We only have what information we have there.
Yeah. Okay. So we don't know. You don't know. But basically, so prepare for it exactly in the same way as you would as an external Amazonian, and go for it and raise the bar, and hopefully you'll have a great time, even greater time this time. That's what I would say. Would you agree? Would you have a different take on it?
Nope, no different take. That's what I would say. Right, I'm going to pick a new one. So let's pop that person back in. We'll have to work out how to give you the rights to this, Yevgeny. I thought we had, but there we go. Right, so this is our favorite point of contention, Yevgeny. Right, so Metaverse Mind is saying, regarding the length of one star response, I've watched your videos on this and your feedback is the best considering it's a behavioral interview. However, my recruiter has said responses, hang on, there's part 2 and a part 3, shouldn't be more than 3 minutes. Also, I've seen videos of current Amazonians saying that it shouldn't be more than 3 to 4 minutes, though I go with 5 to 7 minute responses. Part 3, how do you advise I manage the disparities? Okay, so let me explain to you why that disparity exists. So, with full transparency, Amazon has published on their blog that they think that your answer should last no more than 4 minutes. The problem with that is it comes with an assumption that your interviewer will then follow up with extensive follow up and drill down questions. Now, if you just think about, I should just standardize this math. I always forget to do this. If you just think about how long your interview is going to be, I'm getting my calculator out now. If you just think about how long your interview is going to be, it's going to be 60 minutes, right? So if you take 10 minutes off those 60 minutes, 5 minutes for hellos and 5 minutes for your answers, that leaves you with 50 minutes. Okay, so if you are only giving 4-minute answers and your interviewer does not ask you any follow-up questions, if we divide that 50 by 4, that's going to mean you end up with 12, 13 questions per interview. Nobody wants that many. Okay, so what's the average kind of number of questions that anyone is going to be targeting when it comes to an interviewer? It's generally going to be 3, maybe 4 questions in any individual interview. One of those might be functional. So let's go for 3 questions asked and answered in your Amazon interview. So now we have to divide those 50 minutes by 3, which means that each of your answers from the moment you start speaking to the moment the interviewer says, right, now we're going to move on to the next question, needs to be 16 minutes long. So follow me on the math here. If your answer is only 4 minutes, but the average needs to be about 16 minutes, that leaves 12 minutes of content being driven by your bar race, by your interviewer. That's a hell of a lot of follow-up questions. And that's a hell of a lot of dependency on somebody else to do their job well so that you can get all of that data out there that's important data to answer the question. So if they're owning 12 minutes, you're owning 4 minutes. So I'm just going to divide that by 16 divided by 4 equals 4. Right. So they're basically responsible for 4 times more content in the interview than you are. That is a hell of a risk. What if your interviewer is having a bad day? What if your interviewer isn't really a great interviewer? What if your interviewer is distracted by some other chime chat? And trust me, this happens more than you'd think. The risk is they don't ask the follow-up questions. You've only given the bare bones of a story for 4 minutes. You're either going to end up with 12 and a half questions, or you're going to end up with an interview that ends early. So our advice is own it yourself. Don't rely on somebody else to do their job well so that you can get all of the data that you need on the table. I understand why Amazon presents it that way. My view is that's incredibly naive. They would love, I'm sure, to believe that all of their interviewers are going to be on top form all of the time. I promise you it doesn't happen. I was a bar raiser. I saw a lot of interviewers doing a lot of stuff. Yevgeny and I have coached hundreds of candidates over the years, and we can tell you for a fact there are plenty of interviewers who do not work as hard and fill 12 minutes of extra time with their follow-up questions. So we obviously cannot tell you what is right and what is wrong. We can simply give you advice based on what we know happens in the real world and the idea that we think, should be the agency and owner of your own destiny and not rely on someone else to do that for you. You'll have to make up your mind after that, I'm afraid. Okay, Yevgeny, we actually have not uploaded our halftime performance in
Oh gosh, does that mean we have to do
videos.
it live?
No, so we're just going to have to keep going. No, I'm not doing any of that live. That is not funny. And actually, I don't even know if I still have them on my hard drive. I don't think I can download them from where I upload from StreamYard. So I might have to make some new ones. But we don't have any halftime performance content.
So we're just pressing along, aren't we?
Well, I will stop and ask for the favor anyway, and then I'll try and sort something out for next week that's a bit more amusing. So, folks, we have a small favor to ask of you, and I promise you it is teeny, 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 tiny. Yevgeny and I put a massive amount of effort into providing free content for you all to help you all. We know it's tough out there. The competition is just extraordinary. Amazon is a very complex process, and a whole bunch of you just don't have much spare cash knocking about. So who does? This channel is extensive, and hundreds of hours have gone into creating the content from this channel over years. There's also almost as many hours have gone into our blog that Yevgeny has ostensibly built for us, with tons and tons of free content in there. We have a free course that we're going to give you at the end. We have some free tools we're going to give you at the end, an enormous amount of free content, and we do it because genuinely we want to help. But we do need a little thing in return from you, and that is just to give us a bit of a like. Whenever you want. Oh, it's like the 5th of November on the 7th of October. Most of you wouldn't get the reference to the 5th of November, but trucking on. Please, if you watch this stream, give it a like. I can see how many of you have given it a like here on my second screen. If you watch any of the videos on the YouTube channel, give them a thumbs up. Put a little comment in there saying, thanks, Gigi. God, this is fantastic. Look at the way they float up. It's so cute. What that does is it basically tells the YouTube algorithm that it's done the right thing. It is good content and they've surfaced it to the right people, which means it will have a higher probability of surfacing our content higher up the pages than some of the other content out there, which some of it good, not as good as ours, some of it absolute trash based on people's single experience or people who've never worked at Amazon before. It means that other people like you are going to get great quality content. So please, just a teeny tiny favor, if you could press the like button right now, then we would be very grateful. Okay, and we'll have the kind of commercial break ready for next week somehow. Do you want to pick the next one, Yevgeny?
If I could see
Oh no,
it.
you can't. You can't see it. God damn it!
But you can't see it, can't you? Huh?
God
Huh?
damn it! Right? It's too much for me to cope with.
No, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
here's.
Just
I'm
pick
picking
one
at
of them.
random now.
Yeah. You know what I love about this new thing? It doesn't cover my face up until here. The question.
Oh, you might love it, and I'm not sure the rest of us do.
Okay. I passed the recruiter interview and moved to a non-technical assessment. Okay. I want to know what's the weight of the assessment in the selection process. Well, it's a pass or fail. So I believe if it's a non-technical assessment, that would have to be the online assessment. That's how I'm reading it. And if it's online assessment, it's a pass or fail. That's my understanding of it. Is this your understanding, Gigi?
Uh, I passed the recruiter interview and moved to a non-technical assessment. I want to know what's the weight of the assessment in the selection process. Um, I don't really know because there's a nuance here that we don't know. We don't know if that non-technical assessment is part of the loop or whether it's an extra stage in between an earlier round and, oh, I see, passed the recruiter interview and moved to a non-technical assessment.
That would
I'm
be the
still
work
not.
style assessment, no?
Yeah, okay. If it's the work style assessment, it's well, yes, it's an in or out. I wouldn't call it pass or fail, but it's an in or out. If it's another technical assessment that's part of an early round, don't know. But if it's work style, it's in or out.
Yeah, a bit like a
Uh,
phone screen.
Okay, I'm going to pull this one up for me, but I think you're going to want to chime in as well. So I watched an Amazon YouTube video and he said, curious about who he is, I need to show which tool I used to get the data. Is that right? For sales, I think it's difficult to use tool to calculate the data. So no, I wouldn't say that is right. I don't think in every instance you have to specify exactly which tool you used to get the data. Um, they might ask you if they're a functional expert and it's not obvious how you might come about that calculation, but I wouldn't waste my time personally giving a diatribe of exactly which tools I used in order to come to the mathematical calculation of the data point. That would be my opinion. What do you think, Yevgeny?
I think that I'm just completely appalled at the poor quality of advice that's out there on YouTube. It's just, my jaw is completely on the floor. Um,
Why would you need to state the tool that you used?
because you're trying to differentiate from day one careers. You're trying to say something different,
Oh,
whether it's
just trying to
actually
say something
useful.
different that's not actually
Yeah.
true. Right,
No.
I see.
And 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 the reality is exactly what Gigi said. Like, it's just common sense. It's just common sense. If it fits your story, and if it's something that's, I don't know, that's relevant to your job, especially, like, say the job says, oh, you need to write SQL queries. You know, is Amazon going to say no if you mention that you wrote one? No. Does it mean that you have to completely pollute your stories just with names of tools? No. So
Yeah,
just
because
common
you may even,
sense.
as an interviewer, may never even heard of that tool.
Hmm.
So you could call it Bimble Bop Bop, and I would have no idea whether Bimble Bop Bop is a real tool or not. You could have just made it up. So
And
no,
that's actually a big point, because it's interesting that you go and work at Amazon as as an Amazonian, and Amazon, as any big companies, has got some of its own tools that it builds, and it's got some of the other tools that it licenses or purchases from others, and then you get out of Amazon, you go work somewhere else where you, the candidates, work, and the tool set sometimes intersects, sometimes it doesn't, and the same stuff performs exactly the same stuff. Like, when I went to work at Apple, they were using something completely different to track sales. And my experience with equivalent tools at Amazon served no value whatsoever. Yeah, so yeah, don't do that.
yeah, like you say, Yevgeny, I think that's someone just trying to say something different than no one else has said, but it's quite frankly makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
All right, so let's pull this one up from Stephen. What is the impact of having someone refer you to a role versus applying online directly? Great question, Stephen. So, the only impact is that it gets you straight to the hiring manager. So, a personal referral will bypass the recruiter and head straight to the hiring manager. That means essentially you skip one filter at the top of the funnel. Once you've reached the hiring manager, that's it. There's no real benefit to that reference other than perhaps if the person who has referred you reaches out directly to the hiring manager, having put your resume into the system as your referee, I don't know. And if they reach out to the hiring manager and give a nice detailed explanation as to why they believe that you are a good fit for the role, the hiring manager can use that as extra evidence on top of what they're seeing in your CV or resume. Sorry. But beyond that, it has no value. If the person that is referring you doesn't actually know you and you've just reached out on LinkedIn and said, can you refer me? Actually, you don't get that benefit and you end up just going to the recruiter and there's no advantage whatsoever to you. Otherwise, hiring managers would be awash with CVs that have resumes. I don't know why it's sticking with me today. I think because I've just written my son's CV. The hiring manager would be awash with resumes that had not yet been pre-filtered. So if someone is going to refer you, make sure they know you and make sure that they send a follow-up email to the hiring manager about why they think you're a great fit for the role. And the third thing I would actually say is make sure that they actually friggin' understand the role and your experience before they do that. I cannot tell you how many references I had from internal Amazonians saying they thought a candidate was a great fit for a role, and they were a shockingly bad fit for the role. Absolutely no way would have I considered that candidate. And this is simply because the referrer had no idea what the role actually entailed because they weren't marketers and they hadn't really listened to or asked any questions from the candidate as to why they thought they were a fantastic fit. And I rejected the candidate anyway because they weren't a fit. So you've got to have a combination of someone that actually can support you and someone that actually does understand the role and why you're good for it. I'll pick another one for you, Evgeny. Right. Right. Sorry, I'm scrolling.
Scrolling.
Scrolling. Keep that. Oh gosh, that reminds me of my dad. Oh, sorry, Mum. That's a long
No,
throwback.
but my,
So,
my reference was to a hip hop track.
oh really? Mine was some dodgy Western soundtrack from some like spaghetti Western that my dad used to sing a million years ago. Let's move on. Can you take
Beautiful.
this one then, Yevgeny?
Yeah. Okay, so got an interview for SD intern in the AGI department tomorrow. Oh, fancy. Should 8 to 10 stories prepped be enough for the behavioral component? Right. It really depends on how many non-technical rounds you will have and how many technical and how many mixed rounds you will have. So typically what you want to do is you want to have 2 stories prepared for every leadership principle that they're going to test you on. In order to figure out how many leadership principles they're going to test you on, ask your recruiter, have a look at your interview layout to figure out kind of how much time they physically have for leadership principles for non-technical component, and then basically take every LP, multiply it by 2. That's how many stories you need. If that brings you to 10, then that means it's 10. If it was a non-technical role, I'd be able to give you a more precise answer because it's a technical role and you have that technical assessment, your coding, your whiteboarding, your system design stuff. You need to almost like see how much time they have, how many LPs they're going to test you on, and then it's two stories per leadership principle. Anything you'd add?
Nope, nothing to add. Okay. Sorry, I got distracted. Folks, my mum sent me a message on WhatsApp so that I could tell you all what the name of the show was that I was singing the soundtrack to. I did know it, I just didn't get that far in the track. It's Rawhide. So if any of you want to go and YouTube Rawhide, you'll see that I was actually quite on tune. All right. So, um, okay. Oh, I'm going to do this one. And I'll do this one quickly and then I'll pick another one, Evgeny, because this one won't take long. So, Metaverse Mind for loop interviews. How concise should tell me about yourself or why Amazon? Question B, 1 minute, 2 minutes, or 3 minutes? I'd just say 1 minute. I wouldn't do much more than 1 minute because it doesn't really add value to the variables that drive the decision, which are your functional skills and have the leadership principles, and do you demonstrate the behavior? So, no more than 1 minute. So, I will. Okay, Mom, I know it's Clint Eastwood. You can stop now. All right. They know
Uh,
that.
Ask your mom if she can tell me without googling the name of the famous Italian music composer that composed most of the scores for those spaghetti westerns. No googling, Gigi
No
mom.
Googling, Mom. No Googling. And that includes no chat GPTing as well.
No chat
Right.
GPTing.
Right. I have received a mail which I had confirmed from you regarding outcomes, and it clearly falls under a no hire recycle. Okay. Even before the loop, the recruiter had ensured that he would look for other roles for you too in case the loop is not success. Yeah, but after the outcome, he has been ghosting me. What to make out of it? Okay. So, sorry, my mum's distracting me by sending me WhatsApp. Stop it, you two. I'm trying to focus on my job. Right. So you make of it what the reality is, which is it's not the recruiter's job to find candidates jobs. It is a recruiter's job to fill jobs with candidates. So recruiters, I always think, have the best intentions. They do genuinely want to help candidates. But the problem is they aren't measured on or rewarded for that. What they are measured on and rewarded for is filling the open recs that they are responsible for. So, what is inevitably going to happen is if you are not the person that fills that rec, they will prioritize tasks that lead them towards filling that rec. And you, unfortunately, are deprioritized. So, as with my point earlier about how long your answer should be, you need to own and be the agent of your own destiny. So never rely on somebody else. Always be proactive and be on the front foot yourself. So all I can say is look for other roles, apply for other roles. You can always reach out to that recruiter and say to them, look, I have already applied for this role. Here's the job ID. Here's the link to the ad on the Amazon.jobs. Can you please refer me to the recruiter for this role and let them know what you know about me and recommend me? But always be on the front foot. Never rely on anybody else for your future success. That's a philosophy for life, by the way.
Amazing.
Right.
And did your mom get that it's
She
Ennio
did.
Morricone?
Yes, she did.
How
She
about
did. I'll
see
take you a screenshot of the WhatsApp.
they know the old guard. They know everything.
Particularly music. My mum's a big music buff. Okay, so let's just pick another one. Sorry. Just scrolling. Okay, pick this one. This might be a bit
Okay.
similar to one that you did a minute ago. So if you
Let's have
want
a
a
look.
different one, let me know.
Have a loop interviews coming in the next 5 days. How many stories is it safe to have ready for an L6 interview? Again, just very quickly. So L6, if it's a non-tech role, that's typically 5 back-to-back interviews. So that's 2 LPs per interview. So that's in total 10 LPs. And then it's 2 stories per LP. So that's 20 stories in total. There might be some overlaps in terms of the basic context. So in terms of the number of situations that you need to come up with, it's probably something around 16 you can get away with. But yeah, you would need to prep 20 stories. That's the math.
Okay, cool. So this is a reformulated question from earlier on where I was a little bit confused. So Harshita was saying that there's a gap in his ability, I'm assuming it's he, I apologize, a gap in their ability to be able to bridge stories from your previous role and BIE. Right. So let me just make sure I understand. You are applying for a BIE role in Amazon. You previously worked in a different function. You then went and did some qualifications in data engineering or data science, and now you're struggling a little bit to bridge the gap between a BIE role and your previous experience. Okay, so you need to always prioritize the leadership principles first. When you're coming up with stories, the primary objective that they're working on is, do you raise the bar on the behaviors of the leadership principles? Tangentially to that, ideally, you want to pick stories that reflect the type of work that is going to be required for the role. And then that way, if they aren't testing you directly for your functional skills, they will see within the answers to the leadership principle questions that you have the functional experience to enable you to actually operationally do the job. I think the reality is what you're describing here is that they must know that you don't have the previous experience that functionally aligns with BIE because they have seen your resume. So my recommendation is to worry less about being able to bridge the skills experience between your previous roles and BIE and focus more on the leadership principles and making sure that you show really, really strong stories associated with the leadership principles. If you do not have the functional experience in your career history, there's nothing you can do about it. You can't magic it up. It's not there. And they know it's not there because they've seen your resume. So I would say don't worry about that. There's nothing you can do to change that reality. Just focus on having really strong stories that highlight your strengths when it comes to the leadership principles. Would you say anything different, Evgeny?
Nope. All very nicely handled.
Okie dokie. So I'm going to just quickly do two more and then I'll find you one because they're super, super quick and I can see them in the comments and you obviously can't see them. All right, so do we help with salary negotiation? Yes, we do. We have a really thorough course, a digital course about salary negotiation that you can find on our website, day1.careers. Go check that out and look at the courses tab that's on the top nav, and you'll be able to go to the sales page for that, and it will give you information on how that course works. The next one I'm going to quickly throw up here is a couple of you are asking whether you can connect with each other to do mock interviews. The best place to do that, actually, folks, is to join our Heartbeat community. We have about 5,000 people that are members of our Heartbeat community, and they've all either currently or previously interviewed at Amazon. So you can connect over the Heartbeat community and set up mock interviews, etc. We will tell you exactly how you do that in about 20 seconds. But before we do that, I'm going to get one more question in for Yevgeny, and then we will tell you about how to get to that Heartbeat community and some amazing freebies that we have on offer for you. Okay.
While you're looking for that question, when you were answering someone's question about the quality of the interviewer and how long the answer should have been,
Yeah.
when you were saying, oh, what if your interviewer isn't like good, or following the same, the training and the protocol and stuff, for some reason, what I had in my mind is a question, what if your interviewer isn't an interviewer at all? And I have no idea where this is taking me, but there's a
What does that
mystery land
mean? What
inspired
if
by
they're
the
not an
Halloween.
interviewer at all? How are they interviewing you if they're not an interviewer?
I don't know.
All right. Okay. This is a good one. This is a tricky situation. So let's pull this one up.
Okay.
But actually, to be fair, Evgeny, actually, you do have a good point there because some people will be interviewed by people who are not qualified interviewers. So there is an interview training program whereby you have to practice to become a qualified interviewer. So you would be an interviewer in training, and there will be a qualified interviewer kind of overseeing you. Now, in that situation where an interviewer may not be a very good interviewer, the theory goes that the qualified interviewer will then interrupt and get involved to make sure that you as a candidate have the best opportunity to get your evidence out there. But again, they may not do that. They may be distracted. They may not be paying as close attention as they should be to the actual interview. So that's just another reason. I'm glad you brought it up, Yevgeny. Another reason not to sit back on your laurels and rely on the interviewer to be on their game, because they may not actually even be a qualified interviewer. Right.
As,
I'll give you that
as
final
always, my friend, you're finding nuggets of value where none was originally provided.
There's always something in there, Evgeny. There's always a little something in there
I
that I
know.
can
Okay,
just
fine.
pull on.
Okay, so I understand the need to provide quantifiable data points, but I work as a consultant, and most of the data I would cite as confidential. And quite frankly, I do not keep my prior clients' work. Is there another thing
Oh,
there?
oh yes, I'll finish reading it for you. That's another problem with this thing is it cuts off. I have to work out. Does that help? No, that doesn't help either. Sorry, sorry everyone, I'm just fiddling around. Um, and quite frankly, I do not keep. No, it does stop there. Work handy. That's the rest of
Oh,
that.
yes.
Handy.
Okay, cool. Right. So, typical problem for folks in consulting businesses. So, first things first, don't share anything that would get you in trouble. So, always consult a lawyer if in doubt, and nothing that we will give you here constitutes legal advice. What the way that I have seen some other folks that I have worked with get around this issue, and I'm by no means mandating or suggesting that any of them is good, bad, so just for information purposes. So one of them is similar to what I've seen in some consulting resumes, CVs, that ended up in my email inbox over the years. And that is, you would get a consulting CV, and then instead of the number or the percentage, there would be an X or plus X percent or plus Y percent or something like that, in case percentages are confidential, right? Which is probably the toughest case when you can't even show percentages. Then you can always give some sort of benchmark. So you can just say by X. You can always say that the data was confidential. You in case it is confidential to a level where you can't even use percentages, use some other factual statements about how the client has benefited from your work, even if you cannot provide data, and always mention that the specific KPIs are unfortunately still confidential. I'm under 55 million NDAs. But here are some facts that I can share with you, and you just have to hope that you've got some facts out there. If absolute numbers are confidential, but the variances aren't, then this is honestly a good save for you, because you can literally just say, while the absolute number of this sales or that number is confidential, my contributions, my proposal, my strategy, my program contributed an extra 10% or an extra bips of growth per year, and that is a very, very solid cop out. In fact, it's a perfectly valid coping strategy in case the absolute numbers are confidential. Anything you would add from your stash of tricks?
Yeah, you also don't need to mention the name of the client. So if you could just talk about your client in the abstract, client in the automobile industry, then I think it would be, again, not legal advice here, just covering this off, but it would
Don't
be
do
quite
us.
difficult.
We're poor.
I suspect it would be quite difficult for anyone to prosecute you if you have never actually mentioned the name of their company. So that's just another tip. But again, not legal advice, but certainly things that I've seen done before by other candidates in similar situations. Okay, so we are now out of time, but before you go, and please do not disappear yet because you will regret it if you do, I want to show you a little link to somewhere where you can get amazing free stuff. So who doesn't love free stuff, Yevgeny? Do you love free stuff? Well, I can't hear you, Yevgeny, but I know you love free stuff. I don't know if
Absolutely. Of
that's
course, I love free stuff. I live and
who
breathe by free
who
stuff.
doesn't love free stuff? What we like the best is to pay as little in tax as possible and to get as much free as possible. So, um, for any of you that would like some free stuff, we've got a couple of amazing things at the end of that link. So the first thing is we're going to give you a free taster of our amazing digital course. This digital course is literally a step-by-step guide from how you start from nothing and get yourself all the way through to an expertly reviewed story in preparation for your Amazon interview. The free sample doesn't give you all that, but it's a little sample of what you might expect from that course, and it's focused on customer obsession. That's the leadership principle that most people are going to be tested on at some point. What it does is it uses our unique way of understanding the leadership principles so that you can much more easily pick an appropriate story from your career history and really understand what the interviewer is actually looking for in the answer that you provide for that leadership principle. So you can go and get that. The other thing it will do is it will give you a little bit of a guided tour to an incredible AI story review tool that I just mentioned is available in the digital course. Yevgeny gives you a little bit of a walk through this amazing tool that he's built. It's basically a ChatGPT model that we have trained with our expert knowledge, and it basically pretends to be us. And you can give it your story, and we, via the AI model, will give you feedback. So go check that out. It's amazing. The other thing that we will give you at the end of that freebie is a whole bunch of what we call plausible Amazon interview questions. We can't give you the exact Amazon interview questions, that would be a breach of our contracts. But what we have done, knowing that it's super helpful to have questions that are very similar in order to prepare well for your interview, we've created a whole set of, I don't know, like 120, something like that, plausible Amazon interview questions that you can use to practice on in preparation for your interview. So that's at the end of that link as well. And if you get either of those things, it gives you access to our Heartbeat community, which I was talking about earlier. 5,000 people in that community who could potentially be your buddy for Amazon interview preparation and do mock interviews. You can ask questions of them. And amazingly, another AI tool that's available in that community is essentially all of the information from the YouTube channel has been fed into a little chatbot that we call Andy, funnily enough. And anybody who joins that community can ask Andy a question. And if the answer sits somewhere within the YouTube channel, Andy will be able to give you that answer. It will save you hours of trawling through the YouTube channel, albeit I would quite appreciate people watching the YouTube channel because clearly I put a lot of effort into it, but that is not the point. And that's it for today. We are all done. So, folks, I'm really sorry if we didn't get to your question this time. If you really need it answered, you can always just go to you can always just go to the YouTube channel and drop a little question under any of those videos, and Yevgeny and I will pick it up and get back to you ASAP. All right, folks. So thank you very much for joining. Really appreciate it. And if you have an interview coming up, we have our fingers very tightly crossed for you. And Yevgeny, we will have to get online tomorrow and try and work out how to give you access to all of this stuff because that was
I
far
literally
too.
have no permissions. I'm like a guest.
That was far too much cognitive load for me. I have to say I'm exhausted. I'm going to have to go and lie down with an ice pack on my head. All right, folks, take care. It was great for you to join us. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you soon.
See you
Bye.
soon. Bye.